except for, yep.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Welcome, everybody. We are just getting everything started here, getting it all kicked off here at 6 o'clock. Give everyone a couple minutes to get themselves in and grab themselves a glass of muscle vodka for the for the meeting, or your favorite pop or coffee or water or anything else you want to get. We've got a great one coming tonight, but we're going to kick it off here. This is our normal monthly meeting. So normally, if you're not a member, this is where you'd be busting out a credit card to come into our meeting, but this is a special time that we're all in, so we're letting everybody attend our meetings and grab value. And like I said earlier, this is a no sales call. This is going to be all nothing but content, and we only bring nothing but the best of people in here. And I think you'll be really, really happy tonight as Tony will introduce him here in a couple minutes of who we have. We have Mr. Land Trust Randy Hughes. And let's go ahead and pass this over to Tony now, and Tony can kick it off with goal members. Welcome, Tony.
I'm unmuted, right?
You are unmuted.
Yes, you are.
So it may be Tony and his 3-year-old granddaughter welcoming everybody. I'm not really sure, but I hear her coming down the steps right now. So it's man, it's good to be back. I haven't seen you guys in probably 7 or 8 months, so it's really neat to be back here. And we got some weird times going on right now, don't we, guys? This I was just saying a few minutes ago that I've never even heard of Zoom. And being a director with BNI, we've got 50 chapters right here in Northeast Ohio. In 1 week, we were able to get all 50 chapters of BNI online just within 1 week, working smoothly. So it's, and I think Mr. Lantrust said something earlier on the call, that this is, these are some crazy times right now, guys. But at the same time, there are some golden opportunities out here to take advantage of, with having access to so many people without even leaving your home. So tonight's speaker is Randy Hughes, and the presentation is going to be called Land Trust Made Simple, the Cornerstone of Financial Security. But before we get into Randy, you hear my granddaughter coming down. Before we get into Randy, let's hit our gold sponsors. Now, I don't have a timer, but guys, just take about 60 seconds, each one of you. Now I'm going to go down the list. Is that how you normally do it, Rob?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to start with Roberta Hootie with iPlan Group. Roberta.
One moment, let me get her unmuted. Okay. Hi, Tony. Thank you for the introduction, and it's great to see you at the meeting. Welcome, everyone. I'm Roberta Hootie with iPlan Group, and we help you grow your money your way with self-directed IRAs. How we do that is by giving you same-day processing. We give you one-on-one coaching and IRA strategy sessions and help you navigate kind of the ups and downs, not only in the market and what you can do with alternatives, but also making sure that you're compliant with doing self-directed IRA investing. It is especially important that you visit us at iplangroup.com. I think you can see my phone number underneath as well. Reach out to me, but at iplangroup.com, you can register for a one-on-one IRA strategy session. Right now, with the CARES Act that just has come out, you will see that actually on our blog resources as well, information about the CARES Act. Whether you have a self-directed IRA or an IRA outside of being self-directed, it's important that you connect and find out about the changes that have taken place with the Stimulus Act and how we can help you start to recoup some of the maybe losses that you've had, or just help you diversify with self-directed IRAs. Again, that's Roberta Hootie, iplangroup.com. Be sure to reach out, and we look forward to connecting with you.
Thanks, Roberta. So I said there's opportunities. There's also little challenges here too, and they're doing stuff online. All right.
Yes,
He's temporarily gone. All right, let's keep moving on. Now, Angel said that Susan is not here with auction.com, but Vicki is. So is Vicki Doherty available to represent auction.com? If you're muted, you got to unmute yourself.
Tony, I'm not showing Vicki.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Yes, auction.com has quite a number of bank-owned properties available on our website, and we have a few exclusive foreclosures. As everyone knows, there is a moratorium on foreclosures. However, they are being handled on a county-by-county basis. So if you see something on our website and it's a foreclosure, then yes, we have exclusive properties with availability for those. We also want to let people know that we also have remote bidding available. If there's properties in other states that you're interested in, you can also bid on those remotely. If anybody has any questions, of course, they can contact either the Ohio office where Susan is located or me, and I will put my contact information and the Cleveland office's contact information in the group chat. Again, thank you. And yeah, if you're in the market for any distressed properties, discounts, we have plenty of properties available on our website.
Awesome.
Okay,
Thanks.
let's move over to Rich Bailey. Is Rich on the call from Fairway Mortgage? You might have to unmute yourself. So next in line after Rich is going to be Joan Moran. So get ready, Joan. I see you in there. No Rich? Going once, going twice. Okay, we'll come back to you if you're there. Joan, talk to me, Joan.
Me? Hello?
Hi.
Hi,
We
can
hear-
you hear me, Tony?
Nope, can't hear you. Just kidding.
Can't
Yeah.
hear?
You just,
Ay, ay, ay. Hello, everyone. I am Joan Moran, owner of Preferred Security. I hope everyone's staying healthy. During this time, we provide security systems, permanent and temporary security systems. So we have an overwhelming demand of the portable security systems because I know everyone seems to be very busy. Portable security systems go into vacant properties, properties that are being rehabbed and are waiting to be sold or leased, and then properties, sometimes people like to put them in before the mechanicals go into the property. So all those would be great benefits. You need electricity. You can operate it from a truck battery, but electricity is preferred. And the portable security systems allow you to know if somebody breaks in, as well as somebody is coming or going from your property. We have an upgraded system with an alarm.com where you can actually turn the system on and off from your house if you want to let somebody in, make sure it's on or off. Also let you know if the power goes out, and if the power goes out and your battery goes low on the backup, it lets you know that as well. So we are open for business, and my cell is 440-821-1037. Of course, I couldn't get the background to work for me. I'm not technically inclined here, but I'm doing okay. And our website, my email is JM, just as Joan Moran, period, preferred, the numeral 1 at gmail.com if any of you care to reach me. Hope everybody stays healthy. Thank you.
awesome. Thanks, Joan. Okay, we're going to go next in this order. Angelo Russo, Alan Brusky, and then David Streeter. So Angelo or Mike Rickey, either one of you guys.
Angelo.
You could be muted.
I was waiting for her to unmute me, but we can go ahead and do that myself.
Yes.
Angelo Russo, my partner Michael Rickey is on here as well. We're with Russo and Rickey. We can help you with property violations, evictions, incorporations, reviewing purchase agreements, sales agreements, land contracts, any of that fun stuff. And nowadays, you have to make sure your operating agreements are correct, your lending agreements are correct, forbearance agreements, if you're talking to your lenders, to make sure that they're not just giving you 90 days of no payments and everything due on day 91. Everything has to be in writing. So make sure you're having those documents reviewed. You know what you're getting into. If you're talking to somebody that you're taking over their payments or getting them out of a property, make sure those documents are reviewed, because you have to understand what it is you're getting into. So if you have any questions on that kind of stuff, we can help you out.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Ange. Alan.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. I'm Alan Brusky, Specialized Trust Company. We specialize in self-directed IRAs personally designed for you. With that said, Roberta mentioned the CARE Act. The government's done some great changes. You have the ability, if you have a 401k, to take $100,000 instead of $50,000. Also, let's say you're doing an investment with a Roth. You now can't have 3 years. If you take a distribution, it used to be 60 days you had to have it back in. Now you can use your money for 3 years before it has to be put back. So keep that in mind. We like to formulate plans. We do, speaking of what's going on tonight, we do hold land trusts. We can help you through that. Give me a call at 505-217-1885. And if you have want to do it another way, go to our website. It's specializedtrustcompany.com, and you can schedule from there. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Alan. Do we have a Mr. David Streeter from Streeter Law? Is David here? Mr. Streeter, you might unmute yourself. Okay. All right, that's my list, Rob. Did I miss any other gold sponsors?
I think that's about it. I think we got them all, and we can go ahead and why don't you introduce Mr. Land Trust, the one and the only, and tell everyone a little bit about him.
Okay. Before I turn it over to Mr. Land Trust, I forgot to say this. Rob, you're going to be in charge of the chat box, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So guys, we're going to have everybody muted on this call. So Mr. Land Trust goes, so he can be not interrupted. If you do have a question,
Because I wonder what my hat's colored.
if you do have a question, please put it in the chat. We'll come back at the end of his presentation. Okay. So today, our presenter is going to be Mr. Land Trust, Randy Hughes. Randy will be talking about the need for privacy in creating a secure financial future and the asset protection which comes with privacy. So, Mr. Hughes, if you're ready, I'd like to turn it over to you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hello, everybody. This is Randy Hughes, aka Mr. Land Trust. And I want to cover first, before we get into talking about trusts or anything else, I want to just give you my take on what's going on and maybe what might happen as a result of what's going on. This is my 50th year as a single-family house investor. That's how I make my living in the house business. And so I've seen a lot of cycles, lots of ups and downs. But I call this the survival after the virus, or living in the new world order, because it is going to be a new world order. Things are not going to be the same ever again. However, there will be some similarities, and we can profit. And I think that what's interesting to me, from my perspective on all this, is I spoke 33 times last year to 33 groups just like this one. And in probably every one of those audiences, somebody raised their hand and said, why do I need to protect my assets? I've got insurance. And my standard response has always been, well, I think you should have insurance. Buy as much as you can afford. But don't rely on it, because it's not always going to be there for you. It's just one leg of your asset protection stool. And now, fast forward to March of this year, the businesses get shut down, which in my estimation is business interruption. I call my State Farm agent, and guess what he says about my coverage? It doesn't cover it. And boy, that just drove home the point I've been making to audiences for years. I've been teaching this stuff for 20 years. And it really drove home the point that you can't always rely on insurance. Yeah, you can buy it, but read the policy, because there are lots of exceptions, and here's one of them, a classic example. So you got to do more than just buy insurance to protect your assets. I think some positive things that are happening is our tenants, if you look at it from a landlord perspective, our tenants are going to be getting their checks this week. They're $1,200 checks per adult and $500 per child. In many cases, I know with my tenants, they're going to have more money than they've ever had in their life at one time. And that's a good thing, because that means they can pay their rent and eat. Who knows? Government could send out another check in 60 days if they want to. So this is just maybe the first wave, but I think that's good news. Puts money in people's pocket and allows them to pay their bills, including us as landlords. I remember back in the 70s when we had what was called stagflation. And what that meant was we had inflation at the same time the economy was stalled. My houses were going up at over 1% a month. And I could still remember the feeling of thinking, how can I get more houses? How can I buy these houses faster because they're going up in value? I want to participate in that appreciation. And so I bought all I could, but as you guys know, you're all real estate investors. It takes time to find deals, negotiate, and get them closed. And then I found myself in the 80s where we had a slowdown. Primarily, it hit big time in Texas because of the oil industry. But it was a big slowdown, and in my town, in my market, prices were flat. And I was buying houses in neighborhoods that a lot of my friends said, "Why are you doing that? I'd never buy a house in that neighborhood." They weren't bad neighborhoods; they just weren't going up in value. But very few places were going up in value. But my thinking was continue to build that inventory as much as I could, so I could participate in maybe another time that would be like the 70s, where those houses were going up over 1% a month. That's pretty good money. It's tax-free money because it's not income, it's appreciation. It's going to your balance sheet. It's increasing your net worth, but you're not being taxed on it until you sell a property. And then if you hold it for a year and a day, you're selling at capital gains rates, which are much better than ordinary income rates. So there's some great benefits there. So I built my inventory in the 80s. Then things took off again in the 90s, and then 9/11 happened. Well, 9/11 was kind of a short-lived crisis, although it took 2.5 years for the airlines to get back to full status of what they'd been pre-9/11. So 9/11 being kind of a short thing, and certainly not near the shock that we put into the economy this time. If it took 2.5 years for the airlines to get back, how long will it take to get back to normal this time? It's hard telling. It's anybody's guess. So then there was, I do remember back in the 80s, Black Monday, where the stock market crashed. And I went to the bank and asked for $10,000 in cash because I was afraid I wouldn't have money to buy groceries for my family. And the bank acted like I was a robber. They made me come inside, sign a bunch of forms, and they really gave me a hard time getting my own money from the bank. So these are really strange times that when these faults happen, and you kind of have to anticipate them in a way. There's always something. Nobody knew this was coming, but there's always something that's coming that's going to affect the economy. Then there was, obviously most everybody on this webinar can remember 2008 and what that did, and it took us 10 years to recover from that. Some economists are saying that this is worse than what happened in 2008. That obviously remains to be seen, but in 2008, we didn't put $2.2 trillion into the economy. We put a whole bunch of money into the big banks, but not so much into the pockets of the small Americans. So this is different. And we need to learn and see what we can benefit from, how we can benefit from it. So some of my thoughts after experiencing a lot of these ups and downs are, number one, cash is king. When it comes to these kind of situations, if you've got cash, you are the king. I'm not sure I want to buy right now. I'm not sure where we're headed, what the bottom is, but I think there will be a great buying opportunity. 2 weeks ago, I had a realtor call me. They had a deal falling apart because of this. They wanted to know if I would step in and buy the property. And I said, well, the only way I'm going to do that is if I can take over their loan and they walk from the property. I'm not going to give them any equity because I don't know where the bottom of this market is. I had a guy call me last week. He's got a $355,000 assessed house that he said he'll sell me for $266,000. Not sure I want to buy that either. I mean, it sounds good, but who knows? So we got to kind of feel our way along here and see where the bottom is. Of course, we're not going to guess exactly where the bottom is, but I think we need a little more information before we can go on a buying spree. But I do think that prices tend to drop or at least flatten out when these major events happen. I know realtors are having a tough time showing houses. I know me as a landlord, I can't show an occupied house to a prospective tenant. It can be vacant and I can show it, but I can't legally show an occupied rental house right now, at least in the state of Illinois. So it really puts a brake on a lot of stuff, and life continues. You know, people are getting married and divorced and having babies and job transfers and all the things that happen in life. So that continues on, and so there is a need to help solve people's problems and build your inventory at the same time. So cash, how do you get cash? Well, you either have it on hand, you can borrow it from somebody that doesn't want to invest in real estate but wants a great rate of return. You can give them 5-6 times what the banks would pay them. You can take it out of your Roth, as one of the previous speakers mentioned. You can take a distribution out of your Roth. You can borrow from somebody else's Roth. There are lots of ways of putting your hands on cash. You can get a home equity line of credit. You can borrow cash from the bank. All kinds of ways of getting your hands on cash. But if you get your hands on cash, be sparing with it. Don't go out and buy one property and put all your cash into one property. And the smartest thing to do with your cash is use it to buy as many properties as you can with seller financing. So, you know, $100,000 house, if you can get it for a couple thousand down and the seller provide financing, that's a great way to go, because you're going to accumulate a lot more properties, obviously, that way. We all run out of cash if we're putting 20-25% down on every property we buy. You're going to run out of cash fast. So you want to do seller financing with as minimum down payment as you can do. And the smart way to do that is using a trust. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So I think it depends on what's important to you, whether you want cash flow or you want appreciation. I started out in life with nothing, and so I thought, well, I'll buy as many houses as I can, and if I lose them all, what the heck? I'm right back to zero where I started. But if I don't lose them all, you know, I've got $1 million going up at 12% a year. That's 120 grand in increase in value. That's not bad, and we may be headed in that direction again. I mean, think about it. What else can result from putting $2.2 trillion of fake money into our financial system? I mean, this is just fake money. It's not backed by anything of value. It's, in my opinion, it's got to produce inflation at some point. Now, there's a time lag between when they put money into the system and when inflation shows up. And you might Google that and see what the experts say, but I think it's going to be at least a year or two before we feel those effects. But in my opinion, it's got to produce inflation. And typically, real estate has benefited from inflation, in particular single-family homes. I think it's a great time to build a rapport with your tenants. I've called every one of my tenants. I've asked them, how they're doing. Do they need anything? Can we help them in any way? It's been a great rapport building with our tenants that we've never had the opportunity to do before. And that will, it's not only the right thing to do, and it's a good thing to do. In fact, I send out a newsletter every month to my tenants, and this month we stuck in a Jimmy John's certificate for a free sandwich, drink, and bag of potato chips. It wasn't much, it was only $7, but been getting a lot of feedback from the tenants saying, thanks a lot, we really appreciate it. So again, building rapport with these tenants. Why is that important besides just the human aspect? From a business aspect, my biggest expense in my house business is turnover. If I can reduce turnover, I increase my bottom line. I have about 20% turnover per year. 80% stay, 20% go. If I can reduce that down to 10% or 5%, I save a ton of money on turnover costs, which just kill you. Putting in new carpet and paint and all the stuff that the new tenants you have to do to get new tenants in there. I'm seriously toying with the idea of sending out lease renewals this year with no rent increase if they stay. The last time I did that was in 2008 and 2009, but I've been increasing rents every year since then. But if I can build rapport and solidify the relationships with my tenants and keep them in those houses, my bottom line is going to increase dramatically. So another idea here, while you're trying to come up with ways of making money in this market, is options. To use options on real estate. And what I mean by that is most of you have heard about lease options. You can rent with an option to buy. You can sell with an option to buy to a prospective tenant. But you can also buy pure options on real estate. For example, I had a friend once that was complaining about his utility bills being too high. And I said, well, why are they so high? And he said, well, my windows are single pane windows and the heat just goes right out the windows. I said, why don't you buy new windows? He said, well, it's $3,000. I don't have $3,000. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, if I buy you new windows, can I have an option to buy your house in 5 years at today's price? And he thought about it and he said, sure. And we did that deal. Now, think about it from his perspective. He gets new windows. He has no payments, no interest. His utility bills go down because he's got new windows, and his wife thinks he's a genius. He's a win-win situation for him. He was happy as could be to do this. Why do I do it? I invest $3,000. I forget about it. I have no tenants, no liability, no nothing. I just forget about it for 5 years. 5 years goes by, and he comes to me and he says, hey, I know you got the right to buy my house, but we really don't want to sell it. And I said, well, I really don't want to buy it. So he bought my option back. How did he do that? He refinanced his house. So it was just a financing technique for him, and it was a passive investment for me, but it was all done through options. And you can do that with putting on new roofs, putting kids through college, buying a car, whatever a person's need for money is, you can provide it for an option to buy their house. Now, this works great in a rising market. You can still make it work and tweak it a little bit in a declining market, but it works best in a rising market. So if you want to talk more about that, you might want to send me an email or something. I'll give my email address out here at the end of the talk. If I were younger, I would be buying as many houses as I can get my hands on right now. At my age, I'm really not looking to add inventory unless it's really, really prime stuff. If I can get a killer deal on it, I'll probably buy it, but I'm not going to run out and buy 20 houses the rest of this year like I probably would if it was 50 years ago before I got started. It really doesn't matter if you think about it, what a house is worth until you sell it. And what I mean by that is if you can buy something that makes good sense and it cash flows, and it's in a good neighborhood it's got a good prospect for appreciation, then I think you've got a great investment on your hands. The key to all this, though, is management. I don't care what kind of a deal you get, if you can't manage the property or hire a good, honest property manager, then you're not going to make money in this business. So I do all my own management. I've got people that work for me and help me, but basically I've got my own management company because I've tried other managers and they just didn't work out. So the key to all this is management. I do think that as the construction has slowed down considerably, new homes aren't being built as fast, but the demand is still increasing. There's still people needing housing, population is still increasing, and I think that what that's going to do is drive more people into the rental market, and that will drive rents up and increase our quality of tenant as well. So we got some really good things going here. Let me just summarize before I get into talking about trust here with, I think you ought to maintain a sense of perspective with this. We'll get through it. There will be some benefits to be derived from it. Don't panic. It's all going to go away someday. I would keep exercising. I know a lot of us are trapped in our houses. I'm here at my office tonight, but as a real estate company, we are deemed essential, and so we are still open. But especially for you folks that aren't, that you're more quarantined, keep exercising. It's extremely important to your mental health, your physical health. And one thing I could recommend is a book called Younger Next Year, written by a doctor and a lawyer. Kind of a strange combination, but Younger Next Year. It's a great exercise book, and I highly recommend it. I also suggest that you teach your children about this. Don't shelter them from what's going on. Obviously, you don't want to freak them out, but teach your children that these things happen in life and how to deal with it. They will watch you. More important than what you say is what you do. And they will watch you and see how you react to this. So you want to show your children that you're calm and you're going to get through this, because chances are they're going to be faced with something like this in their lifetime too. And they'll be able to hark back and say, oh, I remember how dad and mom handled that. And if they could do it, I can do it. If you've been holding your properties in trust, congratulations. If you haven't, I hope that I can convince you to start using trusts, because I do think that we're going to have an onslaught of a lot of lawsuits, more than we've already had. We're already number one in the world for lawsuits. But I think what's going on right now is going to translate into more lawsuits, more people trying to sue somebody to get something, some quick money. So they're going to try to blame you because you showed the property and got the virus on their property, and then they got it and got sick or whatever it is. It's hard to imagine all the new theories of lawsuits that are going to come out. So I think if you own real estate right now in your name, all I can do is encourage you to get it out of your name as fast as you can. You'll get all the same benefits if you own it in a trust. You still get all the same benefits, principal reduction, tax benefits, everything. But you don't have your name out there in the public as the owner. The last thing you want to do is be the owner of anything. As I mentioned early on, I think that our tenants may actually end up better off financially. If you think about the ones that have been laid off, they're going to make $600 a week more than their unemployment benefits. I'm already hearing stories about employers trying to hire people back and them saying, I don't want to come back. I'm making more money now than if I come back to work. That's a very short-sighted way of looking at things, but for the next 20 weeks or however long they get their unemployment, that's true. So bottom line is, with the stimulus checks and the $600 extra unemployment checks, a lot of these folks are going to have a lot more money in their pockets than they've ever had their whole life. So they should be able to continue to pay rent and keep you whole as a landlord and a property owner. So what I'd like to do now is get into some slides, if you don't mind, can I pull that up, folks?
Yep, pull it up.
Let's do it to it.
It'll be pretty quick through these slides, and what you guys can do is you guys can type some questions in there, and we can get them over to Randy and get them answered for you.
Okay, so there's my standard disclaimer, which says I'm not a lawyer or an accountant giving you legal or accounting advice.
You're not showing your screen, though. Your screen's not sharing.
Oh, yeah. I forgot. I got to do that, don't I? I got to go to share screen.
Share screen.
And now do you see it?
You gotta hit accept, okay. Once you hit share, you have to hit okay.
Oh, that's right. I keep forgetting that.
We've all become Zoom masters over the last month here.
Let's see, chat.
Nope.
Share.
There's a little green box at the bottom that says share screen. Yep. Hit share, then okay.
Yep, I did. And then share.
There you go.
There we go.
Okay.
Hey. Sorry about that. There's my disclaimer.
There you go.
All right. Okay. Briefly, yes, this is my 50th year. I can't believe I'm saying that, but it's my 50th year in the business, in the house business. I do have a family history of alcoholism. My father was an alcoholic. He got in the car one day when I was 16 and drove away and never came back. And why that's important to you is I had nobody to give me money to get started in the real estate business. Everything I got, I worked very hard for. And I think when you start with nothing and you work a long time to build an estate, the last thing you want to do is give it up. And that's why it's so important that you take a little bit of time and a little bit of money to learn how to protect your assets. Otherwise, you could easily work for a lifetime or decades and have it taken away from you. I've got story after story of situations like that. And if we have time, I'll tell you one of the best stories I can to exemplify that issue. But what are we talking about as far as trust? Just a few pieces of paper. Don't let it intimidate you. We have a trust agreement and a deed and trust. That's all it takes. The trust agreement is a contract between your trustee and you as a beneficiary. And the deed is a deed. It's a little bit different than your standard warranty deed. It's got a little extra language in it. And a part of that extra language says that the beneficial interest in the trust, which is what you as a beneficiary own, is personal property, not real estate. Isn't that interesting? So we got two parties, a trustee and a beneficiary. That's all it takes. And the cost of creating a trust? Nothing. Zero. It costs nothing to create a trust. Unlike an LLC, for example, in Illinois, it was $500 a year. They just lowered it to $300 a year for an LLC. Rob, what's it cost for an LLC in Cleveland, in the Ohio area?
Well, if you have an attorney do it, it might less than $500 if an attorney does it. If you do it yourself, probably a couple $100, depending if you're going to expedite it or not.
And what's the annual franchise?
Nothing. There's no annual fee with
Really?
Not with the state. No, state doesn't charge you annually.
Okay. Illinois charges us $300 every year. If you have an interest, now we're just going to cover a few of the main reasons tonight. We only have time for a few of the main reasons to use a trust, but I've written a little booklet with over 50 reasons to use a trust. And if you would like a free copy of that, just text the word reasons to that phone number right there, and you'll get a free copy of my book with over 50 reasons to use a trust. Hopefully you've taken a picture of that or written the number down, because I'm going to go on now. So what can we put in these trusts? What kind of property? Well, pretty much all kinds of real estate. Houses, apartment buildings, commercial buildings, Kentucky Fried Chickens, warehouses, leasehold interest, contracts to buy real estate, air rights, mineral rights, all types of real estate can go into a trust. And what I teach my students to do is to put each property into separate trust. Each property goes into a separate trust, so they're all insulated from each other. Who can do this? You can as a real estate investor. Your LLC, your corporation can form a trust. Individuals, partnerships, anybody and everybody. There's no licensing requirement, no continuing education. We all qualify to set up a trust. Now, I wouldn't advise you to set up trusts for other people unless you're an attorney, but you can set up your own trusts all day long at no cost and no problem for yourself. Speaking of attorneys, here are some interesting looking folks. And I always tell people, if learning how to set up a trust and getting your name off the title prevented you from sitting across the table from these guys once in your life, just once, would it be worth it? And I think the answer is obvious. It's very expensive to get involved in litigation, and it's time consuming, and you lose sleep, and it's just no fun. So anything you can do to avoid these contingency fee lawyers will be to your benefit. And I'm not talking about avoiding your just responsibilities in life. This, like I said, is my 50th year in the business. I've never paid a loan payment late. I've never defaulted on a mortgage in my life. But I've worked very hard to have what I have, and if you're going to try to take it away from me, you're going to get a fight. Because I've received these kind of letters. I sold a house in the year 2000 that my wife and I and 2 daughters lived in, and 6 months after closing, I got a letter from the buyer's attorney saying that the buyer had to replace one of the air conditioners, all the toilets in the house, and some wood flooring. And if I would send them a check for $8,000, they wouldn't sue me. I mean, really? Am I responsible for maintenance after I sell a house? That's crazy. All it is the art of intimidation. And most people would buckle under that and send them $8,000 just because they didn't want to be involved in a lawsuit. But I didn't. I sent him a letter and I said, hey, now you must have mistaken me for the owner. I'd suggest you check your files before you threaten to sue somebody. And he sent me a letter back and said, well, my client said that you lived in the house. Well, I did live in the house, but some people in America live in houses they don't own, right? And he went on to say, and if you just tell us who the owner was, we won't sue you. So I sent him a letter back and I said, to my knowledge, I think it was some kind of a trust that owned the property. And my last line of the letter before I said, sincerely, I put good luck. And you know what happened? Nothing. No letter came back, no lawsuit. It was all just a frivolous lawsuit trying to make quick money, and I wasn't willing to play the game. And you need to learn to protect your assets against these kind of people, because there are a whole lot of people in America that don't want to work as hard as you guys are working to build an estate. They want to sue you and take it away from you after you've worked 10 or 20 years. So how do we do this? Here's a good diagram for you. Let's say you own 3 properties. You put each one in a separate trust, as I've suggested. Each one goes in a separate land trust, and the beneficiary could be one LLC. And then if you want to do a little estate planning and throw that in here, you could make your living trust the successor member of your LLC. So the moment you die, everything drops right down into that living trust. And the beautiful thing about a living trust, I think they're pretty much worthless when you're alive, but they are terrific when you die because they become irrevocable. And an irrevocable trust is much harder to crack than a revocable trust. But this is a very simple diagram here that you can do yourself. It doesn't cost much, and it really, really works well. I've had personal experience with this structure myself. So the bottom line is, as I mentioned earlier, you work hard to acquire your assets, invest a little bit of time and a little bit of money learning how to protect those assets. You can't wait until the wolf is at the door to start your asset protection. I mean, everybody on this webinar tonight, you all have car insurance, I bet. And I bet you all have homeowners insurance. Why? Just because something might happen, right? You are protecting against the possibility of a loss in the future. And I tell you what, your investment estate is going to be worth a heck of a lot more than your personal residence or your car. So, you know, it just makes logical sense that you'd want to spend some time to protect what's the biggest asset in your life as opposed to the smaller assets. So it's the same theory. Asset protection, you have to be proactive. You have to do it in advance. You can't wait till your house is on fire and then run out and buy fire insurance, right? So you got to be proactive on it. I'll put this up on the screen if you want to contact me. There's my email address. And if you want to go to my website, there is the website address. But Rob, why don't we get into some questions?
All right, cool. I've got questions coming in from some people that actually are text messaging me, and some that are messaging here on the board. One of the questions I got was, when you're saying that you don't own the property here in Ohio, it's going to say, let's just say the 123 Elm Street Land Trust, and it might say Rob Gillespie trustee, or we say Randy Hughes trustee. So in fact, a court, I guess, would consider you as trustee the owner. So how do you get around that?
You don't make yourself a trustee. You absolutely never, ever be the trustee of your own trust.
Okay. So who would you suggest making a trustee? An attorney or?
Well, I have a home study course, and in there it's a whole chapter on who can be and who should be your trustee. But the short answer is somebody with a different last name than you, and somebody that lives out of the county in which the property is located. Now, here's what's kind of interesting about this. There's no federal land trust law. It's all state by state. And some states have better laws than others, in my opinion. For example, I live in Illinois. All my investment properties in Illinois, but I don't use Illinois land trust. So what that means is I could set up a Florida land trust to hold title to property in Ohio and have a Florida trustee and a Florida trust. And there are a lot of benefits to using an out-of-state trust and an out-of-state trustee. But the bottom line is the trustee does own the property. You own the trust.
Are there any states who will allow an entity to be the trustee of a trust?
Yeah, some of them will and some of them won't. But my suggestion to my students is don't ever make an entity unless it's unless you're maybe hiring a bank or, like Chicago Title has a trust department. But don't make an entity. Certainly don't make your own entity the trustee. Number one reason why is I can look up who owns an LLC in every state except Wyoming and I think New Mexico. I think they're the only states that don't publish the owners of LLCs. So you're right back to the loss of anonymity. But more importantly is at some point you're going to need your trustee to sign something, be it a deed or maybe a mortgage. And that trustee is going to have to prove to somebody, an attorney or a closing agent or a title company, that they have the authority to sign on behalf of that trust, which means they're going to have to produce their operating agreement to prove they have the authority to sign as trustee. I'm not going to show anybody my operating agreement unless they sue me. So an individual as your trustee is much easier to deal with. You can operate much more quickly. All they need is their signature notarized. They don't have to prove anything other than maybe show a driver's license to the notary. So it just works a lot better if you have an individual as your trustee.
Awesome. Now, we had another question over here, and it was really about the Government St. Germain Act, about the due on sale clauses that banks put in there. So if Randy has a loan with ABC Bank and he transfers that deed over to me directly, they can call that loan due. So the question is, how does a land trust change that?
Well, first off, in reference to the Government St. Germain Act, that does apply to your personal residence up to 4 units. So if you bought a fourplex and you lived in one of those 4 units, or just your single family house, you have the right by federal law to transfer the title to a trust without triggering the due on sale clause. However, I realize that most of the time we're talking here about investment property. So it's a lender by lender type of decision. I don't deal with the big banks. I won't deal with Chase and Bank of America and all those big boys that have lots of rules and you can't ever get anybody on the phone and nobody knows anything. And I just don't deal with them. I like to work with regional banks, small town banks, where I can walk in, I can shake the hand of the president and sit down if I've got an issue and talk to him. So my experience on this is, in 50 years, I've only heard of one person, because I always ask every audience, has anybody ever had their loan called due? And I had one person in the last 50 years say that they had it called due. 99.9% of the time, the lenders don't know what the heck they're doing anyway. They sell the loans off 12 times and nobody knows anything. They just care about getting their payment. So they don't even know you've transferred the title. There's no title police out there checking every day to see if you transferred your title. So you can go ahead and do it and not tell them, or you can tell them. I went to my hometown bank and I said, look, I want to do some estate planning. Do you mind if I put these properties, commercial rental properties, in a trust? And they said, no, as long as you told us about it, that's fine. And I got a letter in writing from them authorizing me to do so. So, you know, pick the way you want to do it, but either way, you're going to be okay.
Okay, great. So have you ever had a trust challenged in court where where the trustee is actually drug in and making them disclose who holds the beneficial interest?
No, but it has happened in the history of this country. Trusts have been used a little over 100 years in the United States, and that has happened. And the purpose of that is the trustee has no personal liability. So the purpose of that is that whoever's suing doesn't know who the beneficiary is, and that's who they're trying to get at. So they would sue the trustee and bring him into court and bend their thumbs back and say, all right, we got you. Who is really in control here? And they would have to tell. Now, I deal with that in a couple of ways. One thing I provide my students is a trust agreement that I've worked for the last 40 some years on. It's 39 pages long. And one of the paragraphs in that trust says that if my trustee even smells a lawsuit coming, she must immediately resign and forward all documentation to the successor trustee and not divulge who the beneficiary is unless whoever's coming to, whoever the plaintiff is, provides indemnification against a lawsuit against the trustee for divulging that information. So I try to deal with it in several ways. Bottom line here is really all we're trying to do is put up enough hurdles that these sharks will go elsewhere and sue somebody that owns real estate in their name. And that's basically what they do. If you just throw up a few hurdles, they don't want to spend the time or the money. They're looking for easy money. This makes it hard money. And there's so many people out there that own real estate in their name. They just go and set their sights on somebody else.
What about hiring an attorney as your trustee? Do they have the confidentiality for the client privilege there? Is that still in effect?
Yeah, it is still in effect, and that's not a bad ploy. The thing I don't like about that is attorneys are, in the yellow pages, and you can find them online. You can find their address, and you can march on down and serve them easily. Whereas if my trustee is Bill Smith, on the deed, it doesn't even tell you where Bill Smith lives. You don't know what state he lives in. There might be 10,000 Bill Smiths in the United States. So it's much harder to get a hold of my trustees than it is my attorney. Now, I will use my attorney sometimes as my trustee for one day and close the deal. Everything closes in the attorney's name, and then I fire him the next day and hire somebody else. So if you go to look in the public records as to who owns that property, it looks like my attorney owns it as trustee, but he really doesn't anymore because I fired him. So these are some of the techniques that I've developed over the last 40 years that I teach my students. You know, I'd like to think I've thought of almost everything that can happen and protected against it.
Now, what about with a tax mailing address? What are you using for a tax mailing address using a trust?
You can use any address you want. Certainly it should be a post office box, not a street address. But it can be any address on the planet as long as it ends up getting the tax bill to you. Or if it's a notice from the city, the grass is too high or whatever, you want to make sure you get those notices and the tax bill. But it doesn't have to be the trustee's address, and it doesn't have to be your address. But I highly recommend you use a post office box for that address on the deed.
Now, what about when you're dealing with a tax structure, dealing with the taxes? Because the trustee is showing as owner. I'm not talking about property taxes. I'm talking about income taxes and selling and tax ID numbers. So when you're doing getting a 1099 from the title company or from Section 8 if it's a rental property, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, good question. Well, first off, these are grantor revocable trusts that most of the time we're using, and they are pass-through entities in the eyes of the IRS. They don't get a tax ID number. They don't file a tax return. The beneficiary files. So everything flows through to the beneficiary. So if you own real estate in your name right now, you're filing on your 1040 Schedule E. If you put the property into a land trust and you are personally the beneficiary of that land trust, you'll continue to report on your 1040 Schedule E. If you make an LLC the beneficiary, which most real estate investors do, they'll make an LLC or a corporation the beneficiary of the trust, then it depends on how that LLC reports. Is it a disregarded entity? No return. Is it a partnership? A 1065 return? Maybe issues K1s. Is it a sub S? A C corp? Those are all tax related issues you want to discuss with your accountant. But bottom line is the land trust itself does not file anything at all.
Okay, well, we have another one here. It says, thank you for that answer, by the way. My whole distraction of reading these at the same time is, hey guys, what is a release assignment on a deed? I don't know what a release assignment is.
I'm not sure what the question is either as it relates to a trust.
That's not a trust. I mean, that's okay. We have, how do you fire a trustee? I have that question. Are you actually putting something in writing to fire this trustee? Are you verbally telling them you're fired, or how are you putting this together?
Well, that's a great question because number one, you don't even have to tell the current trustee that you fired them if you don't want to. All you have to do is hire a new trustee and have them acknowledge in writing that they are the new trustee. I've had 9 trustees die in the last 40 years. And after the first one died, I kind of panicked. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my property. The title's in a dead man's name. And I got to thinking about this, and I thought, well, I'll just see what happens. I'd like to see where the edges are in life. And so I sat back and I waited about a year, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and I realized one night late that why did I need a life trustee? And it occurred to me that the only reason why I needed a life trustee was if I was selling the property, I needed the trustee to sign a deed, or if I was financing the property in the trust, I would need the trustee to sign the mortgage. But if I wasn't doing one of those two things, I didn't really need a live trustee.
Okay, so that's a great point. One point, if Randy asks any of us to be a trustee, let's not take that position. We see what happens to him. But the second question is this. Okay, you have the trustee dies, and now you've got this property with a dead trustee. How are you having them sign a deed to relieve themselves as trustee? Or because your power of attorney would have died at that point with the person.
Well, you know, let's continue the story. So I had that property in trust for 15 years before I decided to sell it. It stayed in a dead trustee's name for 15 years. And 3 days before closing of the sale of that property, I appointed a new trustee. I took it to Chicago Title. I do all my transactions with Chicago Title. They're the largest title company in America. I appointed a new trustee, showed all the documentation to the title company, and I was back in business. And boy, did I learn a valuable lesson. Because to sue a trust, you have to serve the trustee. Is that sinking in?
That is sinking in. So when you went there and you assigned a new trustee, so you bring I'm assuming you're bringing the declaration of trust to your escrow agent, and you're saying, hey, here's the declaration of trust. I have gotten rid of dead Donnie, and now I have living Becky in place over here. And dead Donnie doesn't have to sign the deed anymore. You're just signing as living Becky at that point.
Exactly.
And that's interesting.
It is very interesting because, you know, people die, trustees die. And so there has to be a provision for appointing a new trustee and continuing the business of the trust. And that's how it works.
Okay. So I'm just guessing here that no one needs to be direct mailing the hospice centers trying to find trustees. That's a bad idea. But that's interesting. I've never thought about that if someone should pass away in the role of a trust, but that's something that's pretty scary to think about, but it seems like it worked out well for you.
It does. It's amazing how these trusts are so flexible. They solve so many problems for us real estate investors. I can't even tell you in an hour's conversation all the benefits of using these trusts.
We have a question here about how does it work if you want to start an adult care residential facility? So I guess the residential assisted living facility, they carry $1 million insurance on the business. So do you double the insurance to the trust also? I think it's just the same way, wouldn't you, Randy? It just doesn't matter what you're holding, you can hold it in the trust.
Yeah, especially those kind of, assisted living facilities, Airbnb, rehabs, all those properties have high liability potential. And a standard rental property does too. So all those should go in a separate trust. Buy all the insurance you can stand, but keep your name off the title. However, just because you put your property into a trust doesn't mean there's no more liability. The liability on the property in the trust flows through to the beneficiary. So that means that's why most real estate investors will make the beneficiary an LLC or a corporation to get additional asset protection at the beneficiary level. So we start out with the trust to give us privacy and some asset protection, and we couple it with the LLC or corporation to give it more solid asset protection.
Well, here's a question. The liability, what about you nominate somebody as a trustee, they have control of the property as the trustee, and all of a sudden now they decide that they want to sell the property and they want to take control over this. How do you protect against that?
Yeah, they can't. They have no authority to do anything unless they're directed to do so in writing by the beneficiary. So they can't go down to the title company and say, hey, I want to sell this property and give me the proceeds, because the title company has checks and balances for this. They're going to say, I want to see a copy of the title of the trust agreement. I want to see the letter of direction from the beneficiary. I want the beneficiary come in here with an ID and prove they are who they are. So if it were that easy to steal your property, these trusts would have died out 100 years ago. But there are checks and balances that prevent that from happening.
Okay, awesome. Do you recommend putting each property under a different LLC and each one under a trust?
Well, each one should go in a separate trust, but whether you want to have a separate LLC as a beneficiary of that trust depends on how much equity you're trying to protect. Let me give you an example. Let's say you got three rental properties, and two of them have $50,000 worth of equity in them, and the third one has $5 million worth of equity. You'd probably want to have one LLC that as a beneficiary of the two trusts with just the $50,000 of equity, and a whole separate LLC as a beneficiary of the trust that has $5 million worth of equity. So a lot of it depends on what you're doing. I helped a friend of mine buy 142 houses last year from one seller. And he came to me and he realized he had a big liability problem. And so I helped him structure, we set up 142 land trusts, and every 25 trusts flowed down to one series LLC. So we ended up with like 6 LLCs. And that was all arbitrary on his and my part as to, we could have had 20 LLCs or we could have one LLC. But at some point, you got to make a decision on how much paperwork and expense you want to go to when you're dealing with this much volume.
Now, this is probably kind of a silly question, and clearly the attorneys in the room will know what I'm saying here, but fraudulent conveyance, you get involved in a lawsuit and you try to move your assets around so they can't attach them. But if all of this beneficial interest stuff is off public record anyhow, and nobody really knows, why couldn't you just wait, and then if the war's coming, then all of a sudden take that one and drop it to a different beneficial interest holder without anyone knowing?
Well, theoretically you could, but don't forget, in a lawsuit, they're going to look at your tax returns too.
Right.
And they're going to see that you took depreciation and interest expense and whatnot on that property, at least the previous tax year. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't have assigned that beneficial interest to somebody else since that tax year occurred.
Mm-hmm.
So there are possibilities there, but you got to be careful. I mean, you got to make sure that whatever you do, that you can answer a judge honestly when you're on the stand. And the last thing you want to do is lie to a judge, because they can burn you bad.
Oh yeah.
So I do have an asset protection course that teaches you a lot of great techniques, but they're all legal. None of them are illegal. I don't want anybody going to jail or lying to a judge. So I have a whole course on asset protection techniques that help you with that way of thinking.
Awesome. Good advice. Very good advice, Randy, for sure. I also, and they can depose you and under threat of perjury. Yep, exactly. From an attorney there. All right. So if you're assigning lease options, should you put those contracts in a trust, although you're not staying in the middle?
Yeah, I would not have anything in my name. So if I've got a lease option, I'm going to hold that in a trust. If I'm selling on a lease option, I sell the beneficial interest in the trust on a lease option. If I sell property where I'm the bank and I'm going to sell it to you and you're actually the buyer, it's not an option, you're actually buying it, but it's on a contract where I'm the bank and you're giving me a down payment and making monthly payments to me, I'm going to sell you the beneficial interest in the trust on an installment contract. Because that way, if you default, I repossess that beneficial interest. I don't have to foreclose. That is huge, and I hope your audience takes that to heart, just how important that little jewel is. That idea alone was worth anybody being on this webinar tonight. That will save you a ton of money, a ton of time, and aggravation. So protect yourself. I think buying low and selling high on an installment contract is a great way to make money in this business. And I do it all the time. But I'm not going to sell you on a contract, on a standard installment contract that gives you an equitable interest in my property when you only give me $5 or $10 grand down on a $200,000 house. I don't think you've got the right to tie up my property. So if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to be your bank, if you can't get a loan at the bank, I'm going to do it my way to protect me and my family from default, and that is selling you the beneficial interest on an installment contract.
Okay, let me try to ask you how this would fly then. Okay, so Randy, what you're doing is you're going to sell an individual. Randy's going to sell Rob the beneficial interest in a property. I'm going to give you $5,000 down. I'm going to take it over. You're going to maybe make me the trustee now. I feel a little more warm and fuzzy. I'm the trustee, or you're going to leave someone else's trustee still?
No, still leave somebody else's trustee.
Someone's trustee. Beneficial interest holder now. So I'm there. So now I'm putting this on, I take depreciation and do all that stuff, or you're still keeping the depreciation and all the tax benefits?
What's really interesting about this, Rob, is from a tax standpoint, you own the property. The IRS says an installment contract is like owning the property. So you can deduct the taxes and the interest you pay to me. But from a legal standpoint, you don't own it. You're buying it on a contract, and you're buying personal property, not real estate. And therefore, if you default, it's like if you buy a car at the bank and they hold the title. If you default on the loan, they're going to come out and repossess the car, right?
Right.
And that's what I'm doing. I'm repossessing your interest. Now, I have a closing at my attorney's office. We make it official. My attorney explains the contract to him. I explain it to him for the 4th or 5th time. We have an actual closing. My attorney holds the all the documents as an escrow agent. So if I die or go crazy or disappear, they can perform and still get the title of the property. So I protect everybody's interest, but I protect mine especially from default, because default on an installment contract in Illinois is going to cost you a ton of money. Legal expense, time, effort, time you could be out making other deals.
Now, what about as far as when you're going to get insurance on a property?
Yeah.
So you're buying hazard insurance, whether you're going to live there or it's just an investment property. You clearly have to have a human being that's going to be on that policy, because they're rated based off of their credit and how many claims they've had and everything else. Is it the trustee or is it the beneficial interest holder that's actually going to do the insurance policy? And then how does the insurance company view that as well, to who's going to be paid out on it? Do they list the trustee and the beneficial interest holder jointly?
Well, if I'm just owning the property through the trust, as let's say I'm renting it out, I'm not selling it yet. We'll talk about that in a second. So it's just a standard rental property held in the trust. Incidentally, in my home study course, I have a whole chapter on how to insure property. So it's all broken down, but I'll give you the short version here. The trustee is the name insured on the policy, and all beneficiaries as their interest may appear. The trustee is the named insured. And sometimes you got to explain this to your agent, because oftentimes the agents will say, oh no, the beneficiary should be the named insured. And I always say, okay, well, so you want to insure somebody that doesn't own the property? Well, no. Well, the beneficiary doesn't own the property. The trustee owns it. Who do you want? Who has an insurable interest here? The owner. That's the trustee. So the trustee is the named insured, and the beneficiaries are brought into this coverage by the words all beneficiaries as their interest may appear.
Gotcha. Very good. Very good information here. Does anybody else have any questions here? Is anybody renting in Ohio? Under their homes, something like that? Any other trust questions on here? We're hitting just about a little past the hour mark. I said we allotted 90 minutes, but do you have to pay any transfer taxes when transferring into a trust? That's a good question. Conveyance fees. So if I'm taking it from regular deed to a trust, any transfer taxes?
Yeah, and I think this goes along with a statement I get a lot from audiences. Well, gosh, I wish I would have known this, but all this property's in my name. I guess I don't need to do it. Get the property out of your name. Yeah, there's a record that at one point in time you owned it, but there are 50 reasons, if you get that booklet from me, to own these properties in a trust. So get it out of your name as soon as you can. When you get it out of your name, you're going to deed from you to your trust. And that is, in most counties, in my experience, most counties consider that an exempt transaction. They will not charge you the transfer tax, nor will it trigger reassessment. However, depending on your degree of concern, if you wanted to make that look more legitimate, you can go ahead and pay the transfer tax if you want to, and it'll look more like an actual sale to a trust that you're not associated with.
Okay, awesome. I have a question here from Doug. He asked, how does holding property in a trust help with title fraud?
Well, I guess I need to know more about what kind of title fraud he's talking about. But yeah, I don't quite understand the question, I don't think.
I would ask a question. I'm not sure I understand that question either, but I guess that one of my thought processes would be when getting title insurance, and they're always going back through and making sure everything's clean and, is transferred properly and dollars interest were put together and everything else. In a trust, there's a lot of ambiguous language. It's not public record. How does an title insurance policy insure against someone that 3 owners ago owned in a trust?
Well, I think the general question here is just how does a trust work with title insurance? And as I mentioned earlier, I use Chicago Title for all my transactions. If you read their title policy, it says that if I transfer out of my name and into a trust, that trustee is considered an agent of myself, and therefore the policy continues. That's not the case with all title policies. So read your title policy before you do this and see if your coverage will extend to your trustee. If not, go to your title company, and oftentimes they will do what's called an endorsement for like 75 bucks, and they'll extend the coverage from you to your trustee. But you definitely want to keep that title policy in place so there's no break in that chain of title, and you don't have a problem when you go to sell the property.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Do we have any other questions on here, guys? And also, Gary or someone on here, do we have a link, or Randy, do you have a link that you can put here into the Zoom chat box of how to get a hold of you, or do you want me to just put in your website?
Well, is my my slide's not showing anymore, is it?
No, but I can go get. No, you have to share the screen again.
Yeah, let me do that. Let's see.
If anyone has any other questions here, we can ask Randy, distract him while he's trying to figure out the technology to show his screen. It'd be fun to watch him fumble. Any other questions on there? Oh, there we go.
All right.
We have
that's my email. If you have any questions, email me. And that's my website. If you have any interest in, I have a basic land trust course and an advanced land trust course, privacy and asset protection, and an option course. So check them out. And if you got any questions, shoot me an email or call me. My phone number is on the website. I answer my phone 7 days a week, and I give great service to my students. If you get my course and study it, you're still going to have some questions, and that's what I'm here for, is to help you get your first trust formulated and get a format down, a template on your computer, and then you'll be cranking these things out left and right for the rest of your life at no cost.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Randy, I can tell you, I've been doing this for 23 years, been involved in more than 1,000 deals, and I still have questions about land trust. There's always types of questions. And there's definitely, you have to have your experts in your corner. And although we don't sell anything here on these REIA meetings and we don't directly pitch, I can say this, we do encourage you to reach out to folks like Randy and hire him for his services to guide you through this. You know, it's crazy to try to navigate this stuff on your own when you have someone, like I said, 23 years, 50 years. Like 50 years is crazy. He told me that on the phone the other day. I was so humbled, like, oh my gosh, 50 years. That's a crazy amount of time. So I was like back in colonial times or something. They were still putting log cabins in trust. But seriously, a guy like that is invaluable, and trusts are definitely something that you can hide assets. You have a lot of benefits to keeping him in there, and it's not something that I would just guess at. I would definitely take some guidance in that. You have all his information to reach out to him directly. As always, right now, this is one of our normal monthly meetings. We have information on there on how you can join. If you want to join, we do get back to physical meetings. We're letting everybody in right now during this period of time because we all need a little bit of help while we're locked down. We have a Facebook group. Our Facebook group is really amazing. It is a sort of closed group. All you have to do is just go in there and say, let me in, and we'll let you in as long as you're not a spammer. But you're allowed to post all your properties you have for sale in there and buy and sell and do business. And it's a way for us all to stay interconnected while we're here stuck at home. And so join the Facebook group. If someone could throw that link up in the chat box, that'd be great. We're up to 100 and I don't know, some since last week, 120 or something like that. But it's definitely good. And I do encourage you to put properties up there. Property prices are moving around a lot. There's some great deals out there right now, and there's a lot of people still buying right now. There's still bidding wars. I got outbid today on a property by like $35,000. Someone outbid me by 35 grand on something. So there are buyers out there. We were in multiples, and I wasn't even close. And I was pretty disappointed. It was still a great deal with what they paid. But so properties are buying, properties are being sold. The county is still open. Things are still going on out there. Okay, one more question here. Maybe go one more. Ask this one real quick. If I'm flipping lease option contracts, should I put the contract in my land trust names? And if not, am I staying in the middle? I think we already asked that one. That one just popped back up. I think it said, yeah, we already answered that. Yeah, always put stuff into a trust when possible. There is the core Facebook group on there, so make sure you jump on and join. Does anyone else have anything they would like to share or say before we hop off this call? Anyone? Raise your hand. Say something in the chat. No? Cool. Well, Randy, amazing having you on here. Thank you so much for joining us. When we actually all start meeting physically again, we'd love to have you out and and you know, do some social distancing and bump some fists and stuff and meet you face to face. But wealth of knowledge. Thanks, everybody. Don't forget that next Tuesday, we will be back again at 6 p.m. to about an hour-long meeting. We'll not have a featured speaker, but we will be catching up on all the things that are going on right now in the Cleveland market and the buying and selling and so forth, and how to keep things moving in these down times. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate you being here. Randy, thanks a lot. We'll go out there, stay safe, and let's do some deals.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.